Action Cajun, which is a non-profit volunteer organization dedicated to the preservation and the promotion of the French language in Louisiana, was started in 1996. And we realized very early on that if we were going to inspire people to get involved in the struggle to preserve the language, we would have to inspire them with a sense of identity, which would be based on the knowledge of their own history, which is unfortunately, or had been up to this project, very much absent from the landscape in Louisiana, from the cultural landscape. The history textbooks speak about Evangeline and Gabriel, or there might be some very succinct reference to the deportation of the Acadians, but the magnificent details of the story have never been told. And it was our hope to be able to share this knowledge of our own history with the community itself. And then the project became larger than life. Barry Ancelet, Carl Brasso, and I got together and decided that we were going to do this. And we had certainly a lot more luck than sense, because we really didn't have any idea what we were doing. But at very critical junctures, something happened and pushed us along in spite of our real lack of experience with producing documentary filming. Louisiana Public Broadcasting got involved and gave us the resources to be able to achieve the final production of the piece. Pat Meir came on board as director. Charles Richard came on board as scriptwriter. And the thing that I'm really proud of, and it was never our intention to impose an ethnic criteria on our crew, but it just so happens that everybody that really had an important influence on the project, the producers, the scholars, the director, the scriptwriter, all of us are Cajun or are of Cajun heritage. And that's something that just a kind of a strange twist in the project, but it was something that was really important for me. Our main objective was to tell the story of the Acadian people to the Acadian people of Louisiana, to the Cajun people of Louisiana. And the places that we visited, it was pretty much a no-brainer. We knew we were going to have to go to Nova Scotia, to the original homeland, but we wanted to also illustrate the life of the Cajun people in Louisiana. So we had to we had to move around South Louisiana. We wound up filming a lot at Chrétien Point Plantation, which was filmed in the middle of August in the middle of the day. It was about 150 degrees and 200% humidity. And you'll notice in the documentary I'm wearing a green shirt. And as soon as we would take a pause, I would run into the grip truck, had an air conditioning, and we would turn on the air conditioning, and I would stand there, and because I was sweating like the proverbial stuck pig, and I would get in the air conditioning and try to stay dry and look cool, and that was quite a challenge in Louisiana in August. But technically, the most difficult thing we had to deal with was the cicadas, because as soon as there was a cloud which came between us and the sun, which, as you know, it happens in Louisiana in the summertime, those magnificent squadrons of big fat clouds that come up from the Gulf of Mexico and hide the sun every 2 or 3 minutes. Well, as soon as the sun would go behind a cloud, the cicadas would all get excited. So you would have all this amazing noise, which was driving the sound engineer crazy, because then we'd have to start and stop continually depending on how the cicadas were doing. There were the normal difficulties which are inherent in any documentary production, but fortunately I think we hadn't any idea what we were doing, so we really didn't know what these things were. You want to know what errors and omissions insurance is? It was sort of like production 101, but in spite of all of these details that had to be resolved, the thing that I think is important to understand is that never once did we consider the possibility of not doing this. There was some sort of spirit, and this sounds a little superstitious maybe, but I really do believe that we were inspired by the spirit of our ancestors, and there was a benevolent spirit that was overseeing the whole project, because as soon as we would come up on a problem, at one point we didn't really know. We had the $30,000 from the Lions Club of France, and we had spent that on development, and a guardian angel in the guise of the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Louisiana, Mrs. Kathleen Babineau Blanco, showed up, of Acadian descent herself, and basically funded the project. So there was always something that happened at every critical juncture when we could have lost our momentum and not been able to do this project. Ultimately, there was something that continued somehow, in spite of the difficulty involved in doing any kind of project of this magnitude. At least for us, it was a huge project. And especially dealing with a production team which had no clue what we were doing. We went to Grand Pré, which was the site of the most important deportation, which took place in 1755. This was the place from which the Acadians were deported. And it was a very difficult day for Pat Meir and I, because the Annapolis Valley of Nova Scotia, which is a very beautiful valley, was the Acadian homeland, but there's no Acadians or people of Acadian descent for hundreds of miles around. And it was a very poignant moment to have to go and to request permission to go on the land to film the cross. There's a cross which had been erected in the 1920s by the Société Nationale des Acadiens, which commemorates the site of the deportation, but it's on private land, and it belongs to a farmer of English descent. And we had to go and to request permission to film. And it was a difficult moment, and that day was very difficult, because I had been to Grand Pré once before, and I had vowed I would never go back there again, because it was just too difficult to have to be there and to see this beautiful, fertile valley, and to imagine what had happened, to know what had happened to my ancestors at that place. And when we decided to go back, I really had to gear up psychologically. I was prepared, and I had achieved this sort of a place where I had forgiveness in my heart. What I found to be particularly touching the day that we filmed, first of all, the sky was a magnificent blue. There was not a trace of a cloud, which for the cameraman was fantastic, because he didn't have to do anything all day except turn it on and turn it off. He's laughing. That's all they do anyway, turn it on, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, it was a really hard-working crew, by the way. And the crew that we were using in Nova Scotia was a Nova Scotian crew, English-speaking. And I was looking into the camera saying, the English people really treated the French people badly here, and speaking to the descendants of the English people. I mean, they come to find out, it was kind of awkward, but it come to find out they were all sort of mixed blood, half Acadian anyway, which was interesting. Even though their names were MacDonald and Farmer, they had grandmothers that were called Boudreau and LeBlanc, so I guess there's something to be learned there too. But the thing that really struck me about that day, I'm a bird watcher. I love birds, and I'd never seen a bald-headed eagle. And that day, both Pat Meir and I we really couldn't believe it, because there was a pair of bald eagles which, as soon as we got to the site, came upon us and floated above our heads the entire day. They never left us. And we were kind of joking, and I'm getting chills just thinking about it. We're joking, saying that's the spirit of our ancestors. And it sounds a little corny, but there was such a magic in that day. There was such power for me to have to stand on that place, to that ground, and to speak about what had taken place to our ancestors over 239 years ago was a very, very special moment that I'll certainly never forget. I think the most important reaction from my point of view is the reaction that we had in the community itself, because although we are proud to be able to share this story with the world, our first objective was to tell this story to ourselves. And I think the thing that has touched me the most about the effect that we have had with this project is hearing from LeBlancs and Cormiers and Comos in South Louisiana who tell me, I never knew. We never knew this happened. We never understood our history. And I remember the initial screening. We had organized a screening. Lieutenant Governor Blanco attended, and all of the main players attended. It was shown at Vermilionville in Lafayette, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house when you got to the scenes of the deportation. And to be able to share that story with my community is certainly for me the most important thing that I've gotten out of this project. And to imagine that we will be able to, in the future, tell and retell this story to generations of Cajun children yet to be born is something of which I'm very, very proud. In order to maintain a vital spirit in a culture, you have to be able to express things. And to express things in the context of the Cajun culture, you have to do it in French. Whether the French language will survive beyond the next few generations is a question that the next few generations will have to decide. But I think one of the most important things about this project is that it will remind the future generations of the importance of our story and hopefully inspire them to continue the struggle to preserve the language and the culture as well. I'm inspired to speak French in Louisiana, to continue to write and to sing and to live in French, not because it's French, it could be Chinese, but because there's a spirit which has been passed on to me from my parents and their parents and all the way back to the original Acadians, which somehow refuses to die. And that thing which cannot be described, at least not by me, is something that I can feel very strongly. And I think all of the people that participated in the project, whether they were of Acadian descent or not, were touched by this story and came away the richer for it. There was a levee break. It was a levee break, and the water came flooding in and was spreading out across the country. And there was a little crawfish at the crevasse, at the break. And he was one clawful at a time, trying to stop that break, trying to plug that hole, one little scoop of mud at a time. Is that little bitty crawfish going to be able to prevent that flood from destroying his world? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But you got to give him an A for effort.